thanks for having me, man. I'm really excited to catch up with you today and have a chat.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. I appreciate you coming through. I've been on a roll with a lot of the ladies, like I've had a lot of powerful ladies coming through here. I've only had one dude so far.
All right, okay.
So we keeping things diverse here.
All right, cool.
Awesome, man. Tell us what you do, because you do a lot of things, and I have an idea about what you do. I don't know what you do.
Okay. Well, by trade, I'm in the fitness industry. It's the easiest way to kind of generalize it. And people ask me in an elevator, "Hey, what do I do?" I'm a coach. And so first and foremost, the majority of the stuff that I do work-wise is that. But I do a bunch of different things. I'm mostly in and around the combatives kind of space, so martial arts being a big part of my client base.
Yeah, City League guy, baby.
Yeah, League guy, yeah, rep, yeah. And so that's a big chunk of it. I've been in the fitness industry for a very long time. It's going on 20 years now, so that's a long minute. And I do a little bit of consulting work outside of that. But so the majority of it is around health, wellness, fitness.
Yeah, well, in terms of that, I consider you to be one of the deadliest guys that I know personally, because you're a man, aside from being a strong man, aside from being a man that can fight, you also know how to shoot.
Yeah, a little bit. I do a lot of, I gravitated towards all the action man kind of cliche stuff, and it's fun, it's interesting. But yeah, I shoot
It's cool, man. I've seen a lot of your videos. It looks really awesome. I mean, it's the kind of stuff you see. You see guys getting ready for action movies get into, it's that
right.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
When they try to kind of get their, gun handling skills, when they kind of try to actually learn how to shoot properly rather than kind of be, on screen guys. So you compete in that sport, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a bit of an obscure sport. Not a lot of people in the mainstream kind of know that it even exists here in New Zealand, but there's actually a lot of people that participate in different shooting disciplines. And so it's not like what you see at the Olympics, and you hit the nail on the head there with what you might see with action movie stars. A famous guy, Keanu Reeves, you might have heard of him. John Wick.
That's what I'm thinking of immediately.
Exactly,
I've seen Keanu Reeves do exactly what you do.
Yeah, so that's how it's kind of infiltrated the mainstream, and a few people have kind of put two and two together and seen some of my IG stuff and gone, hang on a minute, I've seen a little bit of this. But yeah, that's kind of it. So John Wick movies and Keanu learning how to shoot properly from real competitive shooters has kind of like paved the way for a lot of action movie stars now to kind of either follow him either directly with the same people that he's worked with, or other people kind of in that tactical kind of space to really learn how to shoot properly and manipulate firearms correctly, so that what you see in a lot of the movies now is actually how you would shoot and how you'd handle firearms, whereas previously in the Arnold Schwarzenegger days and the never needing to reload and shooting with one hand and all that kind of stuff that you used to see, it's all bullshit.
A lot more realistic now.
Yeah. And so the sport that I do is around the majority of it is what's called practical shooting. And practical shooting was a sport that was introduced a long time ago from a whole of military and active and ex-military guys that wanted to keep their skills sharp. And so when they weren't on base or doing it for work, they turned it into a sport. So how can we set up a range or like an obstacle course, if you will, with a bunch of targets, kind of
simulate.
Yeah, exactly. Simulate what they are doing and some of their real scenarios, and then they'd make it a race, and then they figured out how to score points off of it and such, and then it just turned into a real fun way for a lot of recreational shooters to shoot differently rather than just standing there at a line and seeing who's the most accurate.
Right.
So now there's a speed element, there's dynamic elements to it. Yeah.
Well, I suppose it makes it a bit more of a physical sport as well.
100%.
You can't just kind of stand on a spot and shoot. You gotta be in good shape. You gotta run around. You gotta be agile.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
As far as learning how to handle firearms, because I know that it's obviously a big part of just being around firearms in general. Did you learn that somewhere? Is that something that is taught, or how do you pick that up?
Yeah, so I got first exposed. The first little bit of training that I did with around firearms was actually in the States, in California. I got to do some training with some guys I met. Some I found online, some I was introduced to, and I got to do a little bit of stuff with them, which was really exciting. And I came into it really not that long ago, so I really only started shooting, getting into the sport in 2017. So was that 5 years, going on 5 years now?
Yeah.
And realizing that there was actually a way to do that here in New Zealand. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through, a lot of checks and balances to get the level of restricted endorsement in your firearms license. Beyond just getting a basic firearms license, there's stuff you got to do to be able to start shooting pistols, handguns.
Yeah, because I mean it's quite heavily regulated here in comparison, isn't it? Like,
it is.
I mean, you've got your kind of hunting rifles and everything like that, which I suppose a lot of the farmers and whatnot would have access to. So,
Yep.
But then to get to the level of handguns, which you wouldn't really use them for anything other than sport, because we don't have the whole self-defense dynamic here.
That's right. There's no
States.
Second Amendment like the US, where there's the right to keep and bear arms and whatnot built into the Constitution. So there's none of that here in New Zealand. And in fact, home defense or owning a firearm for the purposes of self-defense is heavily frowned upon here in New Zealand. So the people that do possess firearms, we've all been heavily vetted to ensure that we're fit and proper to own them responsibly. So, for example, just to get your firearms license, the process is quite drawn out. At the moment, it takes over a year to get your firearms license. There's a big backlog of people that are applying. The process should only take about 3 to 6 months, but since the shooting, the big massacre that happened in Christchurch in 2019, there was a big handbrake pulled up on firearm licensing regulation and things, and I can get into that in a second because there's some pretty interesting stuff there that I think you'd find pretty insightful that a lot of people haven't heard about, and I don't think many of your listeners would have heard about. But the essence of it is that if you want to possess a firearm, you need to first of all have a reasonable reason to have one, and then if you are able to cover that one off, you would apply it at an arms office to be able to participate in a firearm safety course. At the end of that firearm safety course, there's both written and oral examination, and you're expected to be able to pass all of that. I think from memory, it's like 100% success rate. Your pass rate, you need to answer all the questions.
I suppose. I mean, there's no room for margin of error when it comes to these things.
Exactly.
You can't forget something accidentally.
Exactly.
You could blow somebody's leg off.
Yeah, you could harm yourself. Yeah.
Is there a psych evaluation that goes with it?
Yeah. So once you've passed that stage, the next stage is security checks and whatnot. So the arms office will arrange time to come around to your home, and presupposing that you're going to be successful in your application, you already need to have security installed in your home. So there needs to be a certified grade of safes and whatnot already installed professionally, and they'll come around and they'll check that that's installed safely. And then once that's done, they've signed that one off. They sit you down for a psych evaluation. There's a whole lot of questions that they'll ask you, and that should take like an hour or so to be able to get through that.
What kind of questions? Do you remember any of them? I'm just curious what kind of questions you would ask somebody to ascertain if they're fit to own a firearm.
Well, some of the basic ones. I mean, they'll ask you some questions in around the forefront of why do you want a firearm? What are you going to use this for? And have you had any reason, or is there any reason to suspect that you might not be mentally well to possess a firearm? Have you ever XYZ? Have you got a partner that might potentially challenge this? Do you have any history of this in your family? And there's all sorts of questions that they might ask you that might be unique to you or might be unique to that particular exam. And I know that they've updated it and it's much more expansive now. But then once you get past that, as long as they're satisfied and they're happy with all of the stuff that happens at that particular interview, then they go and interview some of your referees. So you have to nominate people that have known you for a certain period of time. They need to talk to spouses. They need to talk to people that you've known for at least a couple of years that don't live with you, and they go and either interview themselves or someone else goes and interviews them. And then once they've collated all that information, then they do more background checks to make sure that there's nothing hidden in your past or that they've got on file that could raise any concerns. And then you get the very basic firearms license.
Wow.
And so that process takes months.
I can see why that takes so long. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of manpower as well. Yeah.
That's right.
To kind of go around and do all these things.
Yeah, and a chunk of that has already been in place for a long time. I don't know how many years that's been the process, but it certainly was that way when I first got my firearms license. And so that got me in the door to be able to join a gun club. And if you want to get into the more fun stuff, the more advanced stuff and the sports and stuff, you need to be able to find a gun club that is licensed to be able to host and train people in those.
Right.
In those
so it's kind of
sports.
like you have your license, then you need to be part of a club.
Yeah.
And then
there's more training.
Right.
And then if you can get in the door of these clubs, and there's waiting lists in a lot of these clubs to be able to get in the door, then you've got to go through their process of making sure that you're the right person to be able to go through this education, this training. And then once you've gone through all their training, and there's courses that you need to you need to pass, you need to do practicals and theories. And then once you've done all that, then there's trial matches, as you start getting trained up and how to do stuff. And all this whole time, you don't have your own handguns.
As in kind of like practical assessments.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they want to see how you handle
there's
yourself.
training wheels on, like,
Right.
there's training wheels for months, for many, many months. And the fastest way you can get through that process is still going to take another 6 months of training. And then once you're past that, so long as you've passed everything satisfactorily and you've been safe the whole time, there's no red flags of any like dangerous or lazy or unsafe handling firearms or rules on the range pertaining to either the range itself and what the range's rules are, or the type of shooting that you're doing, then they can nominate you and put you forward to the committee, and the committee will go, hey, okay, does everyone here on the committee, are we okay with putting this guy's name forward to have an endorsement? Is he safe? And if you pass through that, then they'll put your name forward to Pistol New Zealand, and then Pistol New Zealand will tell the police, okay, we'll support his application, and then they'll come out and interview you again, the arms officer, and then you've got to upgrade your security even further, and they do another round of all of that same vetting again. And so, yeah.
The level of clearance is pretty ridiculous in that sense.
Well, yeah, it's a whole lot of checks and balances, but I mean, if you think about it, like, do we want those checks and balances there? Do we want to have that level of security to make sure that everybody is fit and proper? I mean, there are 250,000 thereabouts firearms license holders in New Zealand. That's 250,000 Kiwis.
For a team of 5 million, that's actually quite a bit.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's the majority of those are the hunting, and maybe they have like a farm purpose variety of firearms owners, but for the people that do competitive shooting, like myself and my friends and the people I rub shoulders with, that's a smaller group again. There's only about 10,000 odd, I think, from memory, 10 to 15,000 odd of us that have got the special endorsement to be able to own pistols, own handguns. And until the Christchurch massacre, we also had another restricted endorsement again to own military-style semi-automatic rifles, the AR-15s and whatnot, the AK-47s and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, there was 10,000 of us that had that endorsement for those types of firearms.
What had happened? So you mentioned, what had happened after the massacre? What was the effect on that? I mean, I can see obviously the criteria for getting this license would have become a lot more harsh. There was also all this talk about gun buyback and all sorts of measures of trying to regulate these things. What actually happened? Because I think it was a gray area in terms of what people knew anyway. Yeah. In terms of what public knew, there was a lot of kind of a lot of arguing going on around. Well, should we be doing this? Are we doing it from the right people in terms of that? Like you got a lot of licensed, trained people. Should you be taking guns away from them? Is this really going to help anything? So, it created a bit of a debate around gun control, as it kind of tends to do in every case.
Yeah. It's upsetting for firearms owners, those of us that are law-abiding firearms owners, is that we feel like we were vilified we feel that we were thrown under the bus, as if we as gun owners were somehow kind of responsible for what this nutcase did, and the guns were blamed for what this psychopath did down in Christchurch, when the gun was a tool. And sure, that, and let's be honest, that the tool was originally invented for acts of violence. The guns were designed to hurt people and hurt animals, right? So you can get that argument. I totally understand that. But for there to be 10,000 of us that had access to these weapons, these firearms, right? And the media calls them weapons. So I use that term here. And for them to ban them because that was his weapon of choice. Well, the rest of us didn't do that before the attack. There was no risk of the rest of us doing it because, well, hey, if there was, then how come we didn't do it afterwards? There still hasn't been another massacre because the other 10,000 restricted firearms license endorsement holders, or the other 250,000 law-abiding firearms license holders, still haven't had another episode of a massacre or anything since, because it's an anomaly.
You really don't hear of any licensed firearm incidents, do you? I mean,
No.
To be fair, since that time especially, you really haven't come across anything like that. There's been firearms incidents. In fact, they're on the rise right now, especially when it comes to organized crime, etc. But
Right.
That being said, nobody's ever been caught with a gun license saying, "Hey, well, look at this guy.
Right.
He's got a gun license. He's got access to firearms, and this is what he
And he's
doing
out there doing that crazy shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it was really rough for a lot of us for a long time. We slowed down and shut down a lot of the sporting activities. Kind of got slowed down. A lot of the gun clubs were like, well, look, we're just going to calm things down for a moment. Let's take stock of what's happening with firearms laws and stuff. We don't want to be on the wrong side of this, because right the way through we're still like, we were gutted. We were absolutely not because of the gun thing, but just like all other Kiwis were like, how could this happen in New Zealand?
Especially with something that you enjoy. This is to you. It'll be a positive thing to you. It's a sport. It's it's a discipline.
Yeah.
It's not some vice.
Right.
To you, it's it's a positive force in your life, and then something like this happens, and that it ruins it.
For us, it's just a sport.
Yeah.
And it seems weird and maybe glamorous to people that don't do it. But once you get into it, it's just a sport. Yeah. It's like skiing. You've got particular equipment. It gives you that you buy that's specialized. You get to upgrade your equipment. You modify your toys and all that sort of stuff. And you get your kit that you like to use season by season. And then you get your adrenaline buzz while you're going and doing it. And then you put your kit away, clean it up. Repair stuff that needs being repairing and whatnot. And you've got this sport, this hobby, and you go about the rest of your life, right? That's all it is. For a lot of us, we were gutted, not only because we were kind of getting vilified as firearms owners, but we didn't get to mourn with the rest of New Zealand. We didn't get to share the outrage as outraged as we were, because the media kind of turned on us. And
kind of almost made you seem like you were part of the problem.
Exactly, as if we are complicit, as if we're just these crazy gun nuts, right? The next few things that happened, the virtue signaling that happened with the government, the international praise that our government got and our PM got for being this compassionate leader, this the be kind, let's make this right, they are not us, all the rest of it. And we're like, great, that's awesome, but how come we got excluded from the us? How come we ended up being on the outside of that and we ended up being part of the problem when we were actively trying to be part of the solution? And there were people working in the firearms community that had been working prior to this at trying to fix some of the issues with the relationships that police had with firearms license owners. There were things that were loopholes that the government were trying to highlight as being the issue. And we're like, no, those aren't the loopholes. The loopholes are over here, and we've been telling you about them the whole time. How come you're not listening? And there were things that the government were putting in place that were actually making things more dangerous for Kiwis, making things easier for nut jobs like this to be able to slip through the cracks and potentially get their hands on these tools. For example, just before the attack happened, I think, March in 2019.
Yes, yeah.
At the end of 2018, we had all been notified in the firearms community that the arms officers and the actual officers themselves in the offices regionally were all getting closed down. They're going to get shut down to skeleton staff in each region, and all the handling of vetting firearms license owners and the relationships that we'd now built with our local arms officer, it was all going to get moved down to the Kapiti Coast. So there was a central organization that was now going to handle all firearms licensing.
So essentially they kind of tried to optimize and downsize and not have to spend the resources on the manpower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're downsizing the manpower, and it was actually our Prime Minister who oversaw who chaired the meeting and had the executive decision to make that happen, which was going to make it significantly easier for people to obtain a firearms license. Now, apparently, the process that I'll explain to you of all those hoops you need to jump through, and the arms officer coming and vetting you, and the psych evaluation in person, all that sort of stuff, that's always been how it is, right? They didn't change that to after the shooting. That's just how it is, and now they've just made sure that they have to do that. I'll come back to that in a second. But they are going to take away some of those levels of security, those levels of that due diligence and that vetting process. They were going to simplify things and make it less personal. They were going to make it so you didn't have this relationship with a local arms officer that would end up getting to know you, and hopefully, if they met people in their community that had to go through their office, that might raise some concerns, some suspicions in the firearms community, the shooting community, then we've got this person that we can kind of interact with and go, hey, look, so-and-so at this particular club is acting a little bit strange, check it out. Or, hey, I'm the club captain at one of the shooting clubs, and at times where we've gone, hey, look, we've heard of this particular person, we have some concerns, and we're just going to, how should we handle it, or how should we discuss this with you? And it's been at a committee level, we get to communicate with the arms officer, and then so that everybody's in the loop, and we keep everybody safe, right? But they're going to take all that away. Okay, so and apparently Jacinda was the chair at that meeting that made that decision to make things easier for people, to streamline the process to be able to obtain a firearms license. And then in March, after the shooting, she did a 180 and publicly condemned the process and said, we've always known that it was too easy, we need to make it harder. So the majority of the changes that they put into effect around firearms licensing, they haven't made it much harder. The application form that was only a few pages long apparently is now 30-something pages. But the rest of the process that I'd outlined to you kind of in brief, I kind of stumbled and mumbled through before, that's still pretty much the same process. Well, they already had the right process.
It sounds like the whole thing has just been put there to show everyone that, look, we're doing something about this. We're making it harder for everyone, and now we're actually responding to this somehow, which I think, I don't want to sound like I'm just kind of ripping into the government every single time, but this has been a kind of recurring theme over the last few years.
Yes, yeah. Do we need more government? I don't know. We need sensible laws. We need to put sensible laws in place to make sure that we are effectively keeping everybody safe and keeping things fair and reasonable. But the government should be working for us, not against us, right? And the government needs to have laws in place that actually make sense, rather than having laws and rules for the sake of having laws and rules and extra bureaucracy, right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you, and I think a lot of the recent events can kind of relate to what you're saying. You know what I mean? All of these things that people are protesting about, and I can see why there's such a there's a claim that the protests are kind of disconnected. Everybody doesn't know what they are kind of protesting about. There's obviously a common denominator amongst it, but a lot of people are unhappy about a lot of shit.
Yeah.
So it's not, we're not just talking about one thing anymore. People show up with a whole list of things. They're just fed up. And I think this is why we got to the point that we did.
Right.
It started off with just talking about one thing, and now we're talking about many things. And I think it relates to what you're saying. We've got a lot of rules, and we've got a lot of enforcement in terms of doing it for the sake of having these rules, even when they don't make sense. So I think what you're talking about is kind of a good little description of what it's been like in the last little while, even prior to the whole pandemic.
Yeah, well, look, I've voted Labour before. I come from a Labour voting family, dyed in the wool, right? Absolute, left-leaning supporters in my family. And I personally, I'm politically homeless. I don't know if any of them can get it right. I don't think it's possible for a group of politicians to be able to get it 100% right. It's a bit of an interesting one. I mean, there's so much money that's just getting kind of thrown at the wall and getting wasted, and there's so many things that are just making things difficult for the sake of making things difficult, just so that they can kind of keep to a certain narrative. I mean, the COVID response is a great example of that. There's a whole lot of stuff there. The shooting. You mentioned the buyback before. That's another one. What was that whole exercise for? The thing that people didn't get about that buyback was that it wasn't a buyback. It was a confiscation of private property, right? And it was, hey, tough shit, we're going to take all of your stuff off of you, and we are going to give you what we feel is fair for it. And then what they ended up doing was creating like purchase lists of what they thought, some things they undervalued, and there were some things they got challenged on by the firearm owner before they handed it over. Some things they overvalued. Some things were junk, pretty much worthless, but the government were like, okay, well, on our books it's worth this, so let's just throw taxpayer money at you.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you own the stuff, you'll be like, hey, okay.
Well, exactly. When a whole lot of firearms, we're looking at our cupboards and go, okay, well, that shit's been sitting in my safe for like however long. I've never shot the thing in 2 years.
Let's make some paper.
I couldn't sell it because nobody would probably want to buy it secondhand, but it's in great condition, so the government's going to buy it off me. That's fine. And the narrative from the government was like, hey, we're making New Zealand safer. We've got these guns out of circulation. I was like, my guns never were in fucking circulation. They're sitting in my damn safe. You know what I mean? Like, there's no circulating going on. And the talk was like, hey, we're getting all these guns off the street. We're disarming all these people that were never dangerous in the first place. But you disarmed us how? Well, you gave us money. You gave us a whole lot of money, and we still have our firearms licenses. What do you think we spent the money on? We went and bought more guns. None of us are disarmed. We just got new shit. It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And we've just gone about, hey, okay, well, we're back to playing our game, shooting our sports. Hunters are still hunting. Target shooters are still target shooting. People are still shooting ducks out of the sky. We're still, shooting little holes in paper targets and going about our lives. And there hasn't been another massacre. Yeah. Turns out it's an anomaly.
In terms of the culture around guns, right? I think quite often it's associated with the survivalist culture.
Right.
Is that a thing? Because I think a lot of people feel that way. It's kind of like, if a guy's into shooting and learning some sort of, firearm handling skills, weapon handling skills, he must be one of those guys that's like into prepping and whatnot, and
prepping.
Yeah, I mean, like I know some people obviously take it to to the extremes. They'll build bunkers and whatnot, but is that culture a thing within the gun scene, or
it is a thing, and I think it's more so a thing, and it's a minority. It's a minority, and it's not so much that they're preppers like preparing for Armageddon and the zombie apocalypse and stuff like that. Yeah. That's an ongoing joke, And I get that. I get that a lot.
Well, look, man. Like I always said, if there is a zombie apocalypse, you're the first person I'm looking for.
Yeah,
man.
Look, I appreciate that. It's and that's an interesting one, because I mean, you but you're an alpha male as well, you know, and so
I appreciate
you know,
saying
like
that.
you know, I mean, you couldn't hide it, like you know, even if you try to hide it, you'd still see it, right? And it kind of comes with the ethos that like, hey, if you had a firearms license, you'd learn how to use a gun. If it was really available, you'd learn how to, if you could learn how to hunt, you'd hunt. If you could, you know what I mean? Like if you had the time to learn how to build a house, you'd build a house, right? So it just comes down to like, hey, you're learning how to use tools, right? And if you're into that sort of stuff, I mean, you gravitated towards, going to the gym, looking after yourself, eating healthy, feeding your mind intellectually, and boxing and all these sorts of things, right? So it's just generally a kind of a manly thing, and so we end up getting that preconceived idea that, oh, he must be into all this, he's ready. I'll bunk it down at his house. He must have like a year's supply of food, and I'll be like, we prepare for, I think everybody has to some degree have thought about preparing for, supermarkets closing down and stuff like that during this pandemic.
Oh yeah, definitely. We bought a lot of toilet paper.
Yeah. I wouldn't call myself or my friends preppers. Like that term. I mean, if you can picture an idea of people with it, like you mentioned, bunkers, and
yeah, I feel like it does kind of attach a certain stigma to it. You kind of. There is that stereotype that it must be somebody that believes into a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, the tin hat crazies.
Tinfoil hats and just doesn't want to live in a society, wants to live off the grid, and is just waiting for society to collapse.
Yeah, look, I admire that. I admire that maverick look. It's very sexy.
It's definitely it's a lifestyle choice. Yeah, it's a very alternative lifestyle choice.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like my life is I'm a fucking walking cliche in a lot of ways, but I haven't gone that far. Yeah. But I do get like you said, I do get a lot of people that say, "Hey man, like I see the shit you do, and if shit goes pear-shaped, I'm coming to your house." And that's cool. My friends are welcome. Like come over, come hang out. But don't expect me to defend everybody. You guys are gonna have to do your own work. What I mean?
Tell everybody to bring some food too.
Exactly.
There's not
bring
enough
your own
food for
shit.
everybody. There's a lot of you that want to come through.
Yeah. I mean, but that's also part of the mentality. I mean, forget about guns. I mean, I'm a strong believer that everybody should be able to defend themselves anyway. I'm talking about martial arts. Like you should be able to. If someone attacks you on the street, like if I had a daughter, I'd want her to be able to be able to defend herself, trick that person out, get them fucking off them. You know what I mean? I want everybody I know to be able to defend themselves, and heaven forbid they end up having to do so. They're confident and capable of at least being able to do something, right? And you shouldn't need to have like a tool like a bat or a knife or a sword or a firearm or something like that.
Yeah, you don't want to be carrying weapons on you all the time. That's right. Yeah.
But I believe that's preparation. To me, that's preparation. I mean, if you, everybody should be able to defend themselves with their hands, whether it's boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, something like that. To be able to do that, I think that's kind of like a staple skill, and that's like a kind of a foundational human skill that everybody should have. It's like being able to cook. Being able to prepare food from scratch rather than just like heating something. I think these are life skills.
That's my level of cooking too. I can cook to survive, but don't expect anything.
Yeah, nothing gourmet. Oh man. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you in terms of martial arts and everything like that, because I mean, just knowing certain things about yourself, it gives you a bit of confidence in life. You know that if you do end up in a situation, you can handle yourself to some extent, at least. Like obviously there's going to be limitations, but first of all, you're gonna pay attention to how you handle that situation. You're not just gonna go wild and kind of overdo it,
right?
Which can happen.
Yeah.
People just kind of grab a brick and beat someone to death just because they said something to you.
Yeah.
You're a lot more aware of the potential for damage that one person could inflict on the other. So you're also kind of a bit more foresighted in terms of that. Right. So you don't get yourself into trouble by accident. Obviously, accidents still can happen. People, But with that being said, do you feel that there's enough that it's encouraged enough in society? I feel like it's still more of a niche lifestyle choice. Like if you choose to do something, that guy's a kickboxer, that guy's a boxer. But not everyone's like that. You got the few, you'll know one, but most people don't have that. Like walking out onto the street, a lot of them won't have that skill. They won't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that this is something that should be encouraged more?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And every opportunity I've had when I've been coaching or around parents, because I've been in this fitness industry for 20 years, right? Like I was saying, so I've had either personal training clients or groups, or I've had my own gyms, which have been communities themselves. So you get to know a lot of people. And one of the things that universally that I would always have a conversation around is like, hey, you care about your kids. Well, can they defend themselves? Because everybody should, not just the adults. It's not just an adult thing. When did you first start experiencing violence or some kind of conflict? Well, it's usually when you're a kid.
Well, and to be fair, you probably will experience that a lot more as a kid, because as adults, we still kind of hold ourselves to a higher responsibility, when it comes to laws, especially, like if you go and push somebody and that's assault, you just caught a charge.
Yeah.
And now you have to deal with the consequences of that are going to affect you in a lot of ways. Whereas as kids, fights happen all the time. There's always somebody pushing you, somebody doing this and that.
Right.
So as a kid, you actually come in contact with physical violence. Just at least the physical part of it quite regularly.
Right.
Yeah, so in terms of that, I definitely agree with you. It's good to have, but also I think it teaches kids discipline.
Yeah.
So you're a lot less likely to become a bully.
Yeah, 100%.
If you know what you're doing, you know the power that you have. You know the skill that you have. You know you can hurt someone, but you also start to understand the responsibility that comes with that. It's the whole Spider-Man quote. Great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. To a degree. And I don't know if I couldn't speak for all kids, but when I was a kid, I was a fucking moron. I'll be honest. So I probably wouldn't have been able to put those. My thought process probably wouldn't have put all those things together. But learning enough things that would have or having some exposure to things that would have given me confidence would give me levels of, hey, look, I now no longer have anything to prove here. If I have nothing more to prove, then I'm not I'm not driven by ego. I'm not driven by trying to look cool.
You're not going to go out of your way to just kind of make things jump off.
Exactly.
When did you start getting into martial arts? Like seriously, anyway? Because I know a lot of us as kids that do something. I did karate when I was like 7 years old, but that's not something that I can say that I ever took seriously. It wasn't until I started boxing that I actually got into it, and that was a bit later in life. I was like 17, 18 at the time. Okay. Yeah.
For me, it wasn't until my early 20s, properly. I dabbled and been exposed to things occasionally during my teenage years, but to be honest, I was too busy being a piece of shit in my teenage years, dabbling with drugs and partying and just basically getting into trouble all through my teenage years to have really done anything like consistently disciplined like martial arts. And in fact, it was martial arts and the club. It was a Liga club that pretty much saved my life and straightened my shit out. So it wasn't until my 20s, and since then, that gave me an anchoring of discipline and a path into a whole lot of exciting stuff in my adult years, and that's and that was the way forward for me. It's something that I wish that I'd been exposed to at a very young age.
It's interesting you say that, because that's exactly my line of thinking as well, because you talk about being reckless and partying and just fucking around in general as a kid, but when if you were to do this a bit earlier, maybe you could kind of navigate your way around that, because the way I see it is the reason why it changed things for me is I remember just, I used to, drink quite a bit.
Okay.
And then once you start training, it becomes a lot harder.
Right.
So, when you put in that work, you show up and you give it 100%, it's cool. But then if you've been drinking the night before, it's going to be a lot harder. So you kind of, you learn that lesson very quickly. You realize it's just like, okay, maybe I need to pull that back, because every morning becomes harder every time you do that. So maybe don't drink so much.
Yeah. So
you learn to discipline yourself a lot around things like that, and just a lot of your vices. And I think in terms of that as well, from a young person, obviously, at the time I wasn't quite a kid, but still, I was a teenager. So from a young person's point of view, you look at it as, well, you understand the kind of work that goes into training these things, into sharpening these tools, and like, the blood, sweat, and tears, the sparring, everything. It's hard. So when you take that skill, you carry it with a bit more responsibility and honor and pride. You don't just kind of look to bust it out at any old opportunity. You don't just show up at a party and be like, okay, I know how to box now. I'm gonna kick somebody's ass. Yeah. You don't do that.
But so you're saying like you picked this up when you're saying you're boxing from 17, was that?
Yeah, like it's 17, probably more like 18 if anything. Okay. So it's something
so
that
you figured this out, like what you explained. You figured this out.
Like you learn a lot of discipline around your kind of your engagement with people, the way you engage, because there's always going to be somebody that wants to say something, do something, you know, and as a teenager, you're just kind of like, okay, like, what can I do? How can I respond? I need to clap back. Everybody's watching. Your ego is there.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't know what the fuck you're doing, but you're gonna do something, and there is a high chance you'll do something stupid as well. But where there is, once you learn these skills, you kind of rationalize things a lot better. You see these situations like, well, okay, what do I do? I can react violently. I know what I'm doing, but at the same time, do I need to prove anything to anybody? No, not really. Like if it jumps off, I can defend myself. I can stand my ground, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to get myself into trouble. So in that, like, I think this is the kind of discipline that it taught me. Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. That's outstanding that you actually were exposed to that and you figured that out at age 18. That's enlightening. I didn't figure that shit out, a lot of that stuff out myself till a whole lot later. Because at that age, I was too busy fucking partying. I had no fucking idea. Like, I was a moron. But I was a scrappy kid right through my teenage years. So I was that kid that was in amongst all of that bullshit at parties and popping off and not necessarily all the time. That didn't happen that often, but it happened often and more often than I'd care to try to remember. And I'm not proud of it. Like I was, I had to go through a lot of growing up, a lot of self-forgiveness and a lot of reparation. In my transition into my adult life. But now looking back at it, if there was a way to have been exposed to that at a young age, and like I work with, or I have worked with youngsters right down to the early teens, and being able to like, hey, this is what it looks like when you get to leave a set of positive tools in the hands of these kids, teaching them to be able to, hey, this is how you box, this is how you grapple, this is how you but use it for good, not evil, right? And then there's been some fantastic stories that have come out of some of these kids, where they've been in situations where they've had to use it, and they've had to use the self-defense or the combative stuff, and it's just been just enough to be able to get someone away from them and get away,
exactly.
Or being able to identify.
It doesn't become this, like, you don't overdo it. You don't put yourself at risk. You don't say, okay, cool, if you're going to step to me, I'm going to do 100 times worse for you, because there's still consequences to it. You might beat up your bully, but then you're going to be the one being expelled. You're the one that's going to be catching charges out there. So when you know that limit to actually justify your use of force, to show, okay, cool, I had no other choice. I had to defend myself, but that being said, I didn't go out of my way to kind of stomp his head into the ground. That is kind of, it's an underrated concept, because you never know when a kid might end up in such a situation, and the difference between using the right amount of force versus using excessive force, and actually getting themselves into situations that will leave a lot of consequences for them.
Exactly right.
And like I said, you're on a interesting path, because both you and I obviously have been in the fitness industry, and that's what got me into it. So because I've been a personal trainer for 8 years,
right?
So you've been in the game for 20 years now. And for me personally, this is what got me into it, because in my early well, not even my early 20s, I was 20 at the time, but I was just always at the gym. I was always training. It was my favorite thing.
Right.
And I wasn't sure what I was doing with life. I didn't go to university. I kind of just, fucked around in the last year of school. I wasn't thinking about that because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people got pushed into things, and I knew at the time that that's not what I wanted. So I wasn't sure what I was doing, but at the same time, like, hey, I'm always at the gym. Well, why don't I work? Why don't I make something of it? I can make a living out of this as well. So that's how I became a personal trainer when I was 20 years old. And through all of my 20s, that's what I did. And to this day, it was great. I really enjoyed that. It was a life-changing thing, and I still carry a lot of that discipline with me to this day, even though I've kind of stopped that about 3 years ago now.
Right.
I still keep myself involved as much as I can around my, day job and etc. But it's a thing that's kind of creates a trajectory in life for you. Was this something like that for you, or how did you get into it?
Look, so fitness and fighting were like kind of took parallels, So I found the fitness route first, and it was coming away from all of the negative lifestyle choices that I was making, and I could kind of go one or two ways. I could keep on being unhealthy and being negative, or surround myself with positivity. And I had some people in the outside sphere of the groups or circles that I kind of gravitated in that were going to the gym, that were like doing some stuff with their life that I thought, hey, you know what, that looks like a good outlet. And I'd had enough of the things that I was doing to go, look, this is not the way forward. I don't want this life anymore, and I need to change something. What am I going to change to? How am I going to do it? And so I delved into just going, hey, how can I spin this? How can I flip this? How can I become the best version of myself? And so I just delved into just making myself as healthy as I could. And so I had exposure to lifting weights, and you've heard of Bill Phillips, the Body for Life Challenge. You know who that is. Have you heard of that?
No, I
might
haven't.
be a little bit before your time. So I got kind of exposed to this 12-week transformation challenge type of theme that was really kind of taking off, and it was all like mainstream gen pop type of stuff. So it was back and bis on one day, chest and tries on another day, and cardio on the days in between. It was that kind of like typical bodybuilding split type of stuff. And I was exposed to that, and protein supplements and all that kind of world.
I didn't realize you were a bit of a gym bro before you got into that.
Well, that was my first little exposure, and it worked for me enough that like I started doing that, and some people that I was training with. They started training with me more frequently, and they started saying, hey man, like we've been doing this for a while, and now we're making gains because we're training with you and the stuff that you figured out. I got cerebral with it. I started delving into texts and started to read things like Arnold Schwarzenegger's bodybuilding encyclopedia, and just drove through that as quickly as I could, and I started applying everything that I could.
Kind of found your calling almost.
Yeah, I was just like, all I want to do is make gains, right? and so I kind of delved into that, and it wasn't I wasn't into it too long before my training partners were like, shit man, we've trained with other trainers and you're better than them. Why aren't you not doing this? What can we just should we pay you? Should you just like start doing this for a job? And so I ended up doing like a whole bunch of short courses to first get my foot in the door with some of the tickets, and then absorbing as much education as I could. Got my foot in the door at Les Mills. I did their personal training apprenticeship, their 6-month program. I did that in like 7 weeks, something like that, and I was like, no, I'm ready.
I don't think it was a thing by the time I got in there, because I
really?
worked at Les
That
Mills
dissolved
as
that?
well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was a kind of like a system where you kind of had to, well, so to speak, prove yourself that you actually know what you're doing, because I think at the time a lot of the certifications became quite easy to obtain. I think
Participation.
Yeah, it's just kind of they really diluted them. There was a lot of providers. You kind of do a 6-week course where you show up once a week, listen to some shit, go walk around the gym, look at things, and like before you know it, it's like, oh, you're qualified
Even
now.
like tertiary courses, they're kind of like little institutes.
Yeah, all these little institutes, because essentially what they gave you was a level, what was it? I think 3 and 4, something like that, in fitness, and that allowed you to get your registration.
You get your reps registration, all this stuff.
And then off you go after that. So it became, the whole industry became quite diluted. So because of that, it was, people had to take extra measures to figure out whether, you actually knew what you were doing, because literally, everybody was getting PT qualifications, even if they weren't even going to do anything. They already have a career in something else. They don't want to be a PT.
Well, so the thing for a lot of people is they'll turn their lives around and start getting into fitness. They'll lose 10 kilos, or they'll start working out, and like all of a sudden they're sick of working in an office and they want to become a personal trainer. And the barrier for entry, like you're saying, you're absolutely right. It's shockingly low, and having worked in the industry and worn most hats that you can wear in the industry now, I've seen a lot of the end result from a lot of those short courses, and it'd be to the stage where we'd have people that graduate those courses and they'd show up and be like, hey, I want a job. Okay, let's go through the process, let's interview, let's try you out, see what you know. And like, no, sorry, that's 6 months or 12 months that you spent with that education provider, and the $3,000 to $10,000 that you paid them was a waste of fucking time, because you don't know enough for us to trust you with our members. I'm sorry, but bounce. It was not much better, really, when I kind of went through it all as well. You go through the basics of anatomy 101, exercise physiology, and all that sort of stuff, and you start kind of diverting from that the basics into like more specialized stuff wherever you kind of want to go to. But I found that and you'd found this as well working in the industry, we are behind. What you have really available in New Zealand is behind what's actually happening on the leading edge of strength conditioning and athletic preparation overseas. I can't speak to the bodybuilding stuff. I touched on all of that, and we saw enough of that to realize, okay, cool, that works, but that's not how you build an athlete. How do you that's how you build a person with show muscles, but how do I build somebody that actually can play sports? So how can I build somebody who can actually like attack life and live life to the fullest, and still be able to be fit and healthy and have good healthy blood work in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and how they're going to be able to keep this up and have quality of life forever. So that's kind of the underlying plan, like build the best humans you can, and then if you want to be good at athletics and sports, okay, we can specialize from there. So how did I do that? And I found that education just wasn't available here in New Zealand. I had to go afield, further off. It's a little bit more accessible now with internet.
With
internet, absolutely.
Like that. Obviously, we're a lot more interconnected with what's on the market. The market's become a bit more globalized in that sense. But yeah, I see what you're saying. And in terms of that, you also can't overlook all of the fads that we've had over the years. I mean, you're talking about, people attacking life. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, CrossFit try to do that. I don't want to start a beef with CrossFit, because
let's do it.
I remember there were some very passionate people about it, especially around the time when I kind of started out.
Yeah.
And, like out at Les Mills, we've had, the boxing guys, we had the CrossFit guys, and there was always that little bit of friction between us,
Was there?
As to,
really?
As to who's got what, you got your guys, we got our guys. Our guys can fight, what can your guys do, your guys can do burpees. And, in that sense, I still could see the benefit of, some people committing to that, because otherwise they wouldn't be doing shit. It's like, cool, you found your little cult.
Yeah.
And I mean, and like, I know it's kind of, it attracts a bit of stigma to it, but at the same time, it's like, well, it's not a bad kind of cult. You could be part of some really bad cults. Like, as far as that goes, you're just trying to exercise. You're doing something rather than sitting on your ass or, getting on the piss somewhere. But in saying that, yeah, I feel like I saw a lot of people just get injured all the time.
Right.
And this is where I've just kind of I always had this issue with CrossFit, where I saw a lot of people working really hard, but I didn't really see much results other than injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's jump into this. Yeah,
far away. What's your view on this, man?
Do you know I have a little bit of history in CrossFit? Have we talked about this before?
No, but I kind of assumed you did, because I can see that a lot of your kind of training style you look like a guy that's tried CrossFit and then figured out how to do it right. You know what I mean? Like,
Thank you. I'll graciously accept that compliment. I appreciate that. Look, I had a lot of exposure to CrossFit because I fought for Liga. I did kickboxing, Muay Thai, a little bit of MMA, dabbled in a little bit of that. And when we were near the last couple of years, the back end of my time fighting in the mid to late 2000s, I was exposed to CrossFit and CrossFit style kind of training.
Because that's when it was hot.
Yeah. Before we knew what CrossFit was, we'd already found GPP training. And so if you hadn't heard of that before, getting up with the nomenclature, that's general physical preparedness. You're familiar with it?
No, I'm not. I'm actually not.
Are you not? Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So that probably would have been around my time. I'm younger than you think.
All right. Fuck it. Okay. Let's get into it. Okay. In the strength conditioning sphere, okay, when we're talking about the conditioning side of things, we're looking at general physical preparedness versus specialized or specific physical preparedness. Mm-hmm. Okay. So your GPP is your ability to be able to do something day in, day out in your like a constantly ready state. So if you've got somebody who's really good at digging holes for a living, they're going to be pretty fucking good at digging holes, right? So their GPP will be able to handle that. They don't get sore. They don't do anything like that. But you and I go out there. We don't usually dig holes. So we get out there, spend a day on a post hole borer, and we're fucking sore. Mm. Okay. So if your level of GPP and conditioning is raised right across the board in a bunch of different areas, then like you've got this constantly ready state, like you're kind of ready for anything, right? And so the CrossFit-esque kind of thing spoke to me really well because like I wanted to be ready for anything. I wanted to be Batman. Well,
because I think that's what that was the pitch of the original pitch for CrossFit too. You're just like you're this multi-purpose
exactly
man,
you
exactly. You can do burpees, you can run, but you can also lift heavy shit. You can
exactly that's exactly right.
Pull-ups, hang off a tree if you need to.
So that's GPP. Exactly right. Okay. And the other side of that is SPP. So the opposite is specific physical preparedness. So we're talking about like getting an athlete specifically prepared for like a task or a time domain or something that's very specific to their sport. So for example, with the endurance athlete, to get the very best endurance athlete in the world, it helps if you find someone that's genetically gifted for slow twitch fiber dominant, maybe ectomorphic, so they've got longer limbs and they can burn through the oxidative energy pathway quite efficiently. There's a bunch of kind of parameters that are genetically biased, but then we need to train them specifically to be able to go long. Have very good aerobic conditioning. Now, if you take that aerobic athlete and they want to compete in marathons or ultra marathons, and then you do a lot of weight training with them, you're trying to like increase their clean and jerk 1 rep max, for example, you're now pulling them away. You're deconditioning them from their ability to go long. Right, they need to be very specialized. So that's why if you take an endurance athlete and you go, hey, we're going to have like bench press day, we're going to see what you can lift, bro. they're not going to put up very good numbers. It's just not going to happen. You're going to crush them. You might even break them. Conversely, if you take the average gym bro that's just been doing leg press and benching out with the boys, and then you get them to do a marathon, well, they're going to die, right? They're not going to do very well. So if you take a specialized Olympic weightlifter that's at one end of the continuum as a power fast twitch, very biased towards the phosphogenic or glycolytic energy pathways, creatine phosphate pathway, and then you go, hey, like we're going to compete in an endurance event. They can't do it. Take an endurance athlete and try and do a power event. They can't do it. So they're very specialized, right? So that's SPP.
It's kind of like when Usain Bolt was talking about how they try to make him run long distance, and he just fucking hated it. And he's like, I was too lazy. I just wanted to run short. I wanted to get it over and done with. And that's when they discovered that
he's fast twitch dominant.
Yeah,
he's genetically gifted. Yeah, he's the bullet, right? Yeah. So they figured out his SPP and his genetic predetermination was that he should be a power athlete. He should be so. If you were to cross-train him or do some dry land stuff, then being able to do like a heavy power clean might be beneficial for him. I don't know. I don't train sprinters specifically, but
it'll be something
they might be
explosive.
Able to do
something. It's fast explosive. You're not looking to kind of progressively increase your heart rate. Like you're straight into it. Yeah,
you just need him to be a bad motherfucker for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. And so for him to do like a round of boxing for 3 minutes, I mean, there might be some crossover, but minimal. Yeah. And the more you do of that, the more you're going to detune his highly specialized capacity, right? Yeah. And so where it was with CrossFit was that it's a GPP program. So the idea and the theory is exactly right, like how you mentioned, like this badass that is ready to be able to do anything. It's constantly ready to state that the descriptive analogy I used was like, hey, if you wanted to be Batman, how would you train Batman, right? So you do that sort of stuff. And so like I kind of thought, hey, that's pretty cool. How do I raise my GPP? Because we knew as fighters, if we could raise our GPP, then I'm going to be balanced. I'm going to be structurally balanced. I'm going to be able to develop my body and tune it so that I could be the best genetic potential version of myself. I could have the power to be able to strike explosively and with put
like knockout power.
Exactly.
Because I mean, actually, yeah, you're right, and it's you have to be quite versatile in fighting, because on one hand, yeah, you do want to be able to punch somebody hard enough to kind of put them down. That's it. But on the other hand, if this fight goes into the later rounds, what's going to happen there? You're going to gas out.
Yeah. And we're going to MMA, so like we're grappling, we're on the ground. You could have a gorilla on you, and you're just rolling and tumbling, and you're hitting each other.
Different kettle of fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
And they're 5-minute rounds, so you need to have some endurance, some stamina for that as well, right?
You need heaps of endurance.
Yeah. So that's a thing, and so GPP training was like, okay, perfect. That's us. Outside of like, we're not going to be doing we don't do any curls and like that. Like, there's nothing non-functional. So it was all functional movements that I could do at a high intensity that could hopefully exceed the metabolic demand that I'm going to have in my fight. And that just worked out perfect. And then one of my training buddies, he sent me a link to this website. It was a CrossFit website. And it's like, hey man, these guys are doing what we're doing. I'm like, nah. I was arrogant. I was like, nah, man. There's no way. We figured it out. There's no way, right? And I started delving into it, and I started seeing some of the YouTube videos, and there's some women doing crazy things that I couldn't do, and I was like, fuck. What is this thing they're doing on the rings? They're doing muscle ups, and
I was like, gymnastics.
Yeah. I was like, I got to try that out, and I went to the gymnastics center, and I was like, hey man, I got a ring guy. Hey, can you show me how to do a muscle up? And they're like, yeah, they could do it. I couldn't. And it crushed my ego. I'm like, okay, so there's all these little tiny women, like 50-kilo women on this video that are like doing these heavy power cleans and muscle ups on the rings. And I can't, I'm this alpha male type in my head that hey, I should be able to do this. And I couldn't do it. And so I was like, okay, hang on, I need to figure out what the stuff is about. And that's when we kind of delved into it. At the time, there was no CrossFit in New Zealand. So we're talking like 2006. Nobody knew what the fuck CrossFit was. And so I'd reached out to CrossFit headquarters after some months and said, hey, this is great. I now knew about the affiliate gym program that they had overseas. I was like, hey, we want to open an affiliate here in New Zealand. We want to bring it here to NZ. What can we do? And they told me, hey, there's one other guy that had just approached us as well from New Zealand. I was like, fucking awesome. There's more than us, not just me and my boys. And so we ended up linking up with them, and there was this real small hub in its infancy in New Zealand where there was probably only like me and my boys and some of my clients and these guys across town, Darren and Taz, that had a handful of their clients and were just opening their first gym. So they beat us to it by, I think, like about affiliation by about 6 weeks. And then they had a bricks and mortar location well ahead of us. And I was still doing stuff at Les Mills at the time. But that was the beginning of CrossFit. And at the time there was no long chain of all these trainers all over the place that were kind of dabbling in it, and you're injuring people that the reputation that CrossFit got that you picked up on. It was just us, right? And we were getting it pure from the source, So by the time we actually opened doors, like I opened the second affiliate in New Zealand, CrossFit Auckland, and we when I stepped away from that, we had 2 branches. We had one in the city, we had one on the North Shore, and we were amongst the first of 500 CrossFit gyms around the world at the time. That sounds like a lot, but now there's about 15,000 of them. Yeah. And a lot of people have come and gone and de-affiliated and gone done their own thing outside of the model.
I think that's it kind of tells you something though. Just like anything that becomes essentially mass produced, isn't it? It's kind of like, it sounds like we're at the time there was a proper approach to it. There was, like a specialized approach to what you were doing before it became this like, oh, hey, do you work in an office? Do you feel like you need to exercise? Try CrossFit. Yeah. It was looked at as something a bit more serious than that. Like, you don't just throw people in there. You actually need to kind of work your way in. You can't just pick this stuff up off the street. I think this is where things started going wrong, is people just kind of like never exercised before. Ooh, what should I do? I know this guy, that looks cool, especially with the advent of all the Instagram fitness trends, like
100%.
That's definitely changed the fitness industry a lot. Right. And it's got all these people that have never exercised before involved, and I feel like with CrossFit, a lot of them ended up jumping off into the deep, like too deep an end for what they were, and I think this is where we ended up with this bad reputation that it's got.
Well, it was always at the beginning, it was an edgy counterculture. You know, it was people that were already athletes or athletically minded that had already had some exposure to some of these things, that were humble enough to go, okay, I need to learn how to do this properly before I just like tear away at it. You know, it wasn't just like, it wasn't the soccer mums and the rest of the stuff that you know, the midlife crisis, you know, Gen Pop person that's just gone, hey, I'm going to sign up for this class and I'm now going to try and throw a 50-kilo barbell over my head for the first time tonight. We didn't have any of that, but we did have, I mean, it was built around the military and law enforcement and fire service and Olympian athletes and a lot of pro or semi-pro athletes in the United States. And then when it kind of it infiltrated the mainstream, it started to kind of get a little bit diluted. You know, we when we first started off, the conversation wasn't around, hey, look, come sign up and come and jump into our classes. It was a whole conversation of like, hey, we need to explain what the fuck this CrossFit thing is, because nobody knew. We had to try and explain it.
I mean, you kind of want to try and figure out what a person's background is as well. Like, where have you come from? What do you know already?
Yeah. And so we had to figure out, okay, where are you? Who are you? What are you about? What are you trying to accomplish with your time spent training with us? So we vetted them as a good coach or trainer or even a personal trainer should do. And then once we've got all of that, okay, here is how we're going to onboard you, because our classes are going to be fast-paced. And if we put you in there and you try and keep up with everybody that's already been here a little while, you know, you're going to have a bad experience, you know, and people would, you know, that if left unchecked, they'd push themselves so hard that they'd end up getting nauseous, or they might potentially injure themselves. We don't want that. We don't. Our reputation was everything, you know. So we need to make sure that people had a good experience, and we wanted to make sure they're successful. But one of the things that came across to my CrossFit gyms that we have at our clubs here, and we have it at Liga, is like, we don't want people walking around saying, hey, I train at that club, and them not being a physical specimen of like, hey, they live and breathe as a good ambassador for our club and our brand and our community. You know, they should be proud of this choice that they've made to trust us, right? And so we didn't want people to go, hey, I like the Gen Pop model, hey, I'm a member at such and such a gym, but like, you're a fat slob. When was the last time you went, I just pay my membership, I don't go. You know, I go once every 6 months.
It's like any club that takes itself seriously, really. You know, if you're a club member, you represent that club. Yeah. And you have to kind of, you know, you carry yourself and conduct yourself appropriately. Yeah. You know, and as people that run this club, you kind of, you want to pay attention to that. I think this is what kind of got lost in translation later down the line for a lot of these places where it was just about having the members. It was about showing everybody that you were popular rather than kind of actually...
Yeah. And the barrier for entry is really low. Coming back to the industry as a whole, it's an unregulated industry. It really is. I mean, we've got a register of exercise professionals, but really they're bureaucrats that just take people's money and
it's more for the purposes of insurance. If that's what you're doing. And again, you know, half the people out there, you don't know if they got insurance or not. It's not like they tell you.
No.
You know, there's plenty of Instagram trainers that actually put themselves out as a legitimate business. Like, hey, this is what I do. I make programs. I do this and that. Come sign with me. But if you do actually pull them up on anything, half of them aren't qualified to do anything. It just kind of, they went to the gym a few times and thought, oh, hey, this is good. I'll look pretty good doing this. Yeah. You know? Yeah. I'll attract people that way and make some money out of this. Yeah.
Well, the CrossFit model for to become a CrossFit trainer, a level 1 instructor, is a weekend course. And it's a weekend course that now has a test attached to it, but previously for the longest time it did not. And if you're paying attention during the course of the weekend and you've been reading the manual that they provide with the $1,000 US fee for the course, it shouldn't be too hard to be able to pass that basic level of qualification. And once you've got that, then you can apply to become an affiliate. And if you're of good standing and you can answer a few questions and you've got a half decent plan of where you're going to open doors, then another nominal annual fee to CrossFit headquarters, and you can open your own gym.
Of course, yeah.
You can open CrossFit
somebody's
XYZ.
got to make money out of the brand.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. Their brand is worth a lot, and they fiercely protect that brand, and I'm not opposed to that at all. The flip side to that is that opened the doors for a lot of operators, and so there was a lot of people that were now teaching CrossFit that may not have been as competent as some of the other instructors that of a higher caliber, but we're all the same overarching brand. So if somebody goes to XYZ CrossFit gym down the road and it's slightly Mickey Mouse, or that person's got their certificate, they've got their affiliation approved, but then there's no oversight as to the quality of that coaching or the ethos of that the coaching instruction in the community there, and how they would prescribe their workouts and how they would onboard their people, whether they do that safely or not, or whether they have the intent to, but maybe it's not the right process to be able to vet and walk through the elements that you need to learn to be able to safely participate in a fast-paced CrossFit class. Well, then if they're not that, then that's the population that may potentially be injured and may potentially end up giving CrossFit a bad name. And so we ended up getting a lot of that happening. And so all of us that we feel were good operators, operating good standard with good ethics and systems in place to be able to make sure that people were learning how to do things safely, effectively, and becoming really good at getting fit, really good CrossFitters. They
ended up getting a bad rep.
They ended up getting a bad rep.
It kind of almost reminds me of the gun thing we talked about just before. Somebody always fucks it up for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the people in the protest right now down in Wellington. I mean, there's one or two people down there that are fucking it up for the rest of the protesters. There's thousands of people down there across many city blocks, but what you hear about in the news is just that one or two
guy that's
people.
throwing shit,
Yeah, exactly. One or two people.
I mean, again, that being said, I do have to say that the media coverage of this whole thing has been horrendous. I don't know where the journalism ethics have gone on this, but I feel like it's extremely biased.
Yeah, well,
there's definitely an image they're trying to push, especially with that protest. You see the most, the weirdest looking people. They go out of their way to find the weirdest looking people, take pictures of them and say, hey, this is what it looks like.
Right.
Is this where you want to be? Are these guys the guys you want to support? It's that kind of thing, I don't like that. It's definitely gaslighting. It's not unbiased journalism, they always bang on about ethics and stuff like that when they teach this stuff in universities, ethics. They go hard on ethics on anything these days. If it's business, if it's PR, anything that I've studied, everything is just look, ethics, get that out of the way first before you do anything. So you kind of assume that this is something that would be applicable in the real world. But I think the moment you go out the door and actually go out into the real world, ethics go out the window.
Really?
Yeah.
I think so.
When it comes to a lot of the things that they teach in universities. I don't know if it applies to every single thing, but so far from my personal experience, be it finance, economics, public relations, those are the areas that I've actually studied in. Mm-hmm. What I've learned versus the real world application there's a huge disconnect.
Right.
Yeah, they try to kind of give you an ideal example of how it's meant to be. The reality is very different, and you pick up on that very quickly.
Mm. So do you think that they're just trying to do their due diligence by covering off ethics, but really the people that are teaching it, are they in on it? Do they know that it's all going to go out the window? They just
probably not. I think that a lot of these academics, they legitimately believe in that, but that's I think the disconnect between the academics and
the people on the ground.
People working. Yeah, there's people that have PhDs in management and PR and whatnot, and in their mind this is how it should be. But then you go and work and you figure out that nobody gives a shit what these guys think. No one's paying attention. No one's reading those academic journals they're writing. Yeah. It's literally only the students. The real world application is different, and and it's always the same thing. It's it's marketability, clickbait.
Yeah.
whatever makes dollars, whatever sells.
Yeah, 100%. It's a business, right?
Yeah.
And with the mainstream media, it's an entertainment business.
Oh, definitely.
Right, it's entertainment and marketing. I mean, anyone that thinks otherwise. I mean, the older generation, my parents, our parents' generation, their perception of what the media is something completely different to us. And I think that a lot of that generation haven't even realized that doesn't exist anymore.
That's true, and I think this is where a lot of people that believe what they see in the media come from. It's that demographic. It's the older generation that still sees these things on TV. They read the newspapers and say, "Hey, look at this."
The one source of truth, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then I think social media has really kind of been a counterweight to that. In terms of that, I mean, there's still plenty of disinformation. There's still plenty of ways to kind of doctor these things and present things in a specific way. But at the end of the day, right? If you put a guy whose job it is to write an article, who has a qualification and he's been taken into that job to do something, to write as his job, versus a guy who just showed up and put his phone on Instagram Live, whatever, Facebook Live, TikTok Live, and you just watch, and then you kind of put it up against what that guy wrote, who are you going to trust more?
Yeah.
And I think with us, with our generation, we're a bit more open-minded to that. We say, well, hey, look, at least I'm just going to see what's happening. I mean, hey, yeah, maybe he'll present it in a specific way. Maybe he'll say something. Maybe he'll take an out-of-context video. But like with the person that's more likely to do that is the guy whose job it is to present these news. And because a lot of them will go through an editorial process. And what does an editor do? Yeah. It's not like it just goes out unfiltered. The editor will say, okay, cool, well, we'll need to change this up a little bit. Yeah.
They have stakeholders too, right?
They do have stakeholders, and they have certain responsibilities, I suppose, as well. I think this is where the bureaucracy comes into it as well, because it can be held accountable. If if they present information and someone reacts to it, they'll say, well, look, you did this. Whereas you're not going to hold a private person accountable for just putting their phone on. It's their right to do that. Yeah, so I can tell everyone what had happened. You can't stop that. Yeah.
And so they have an ethical and a legal responsibility to make sure that they're not saying or producing anything that first is factually incorrect, but also that could be potentially inflammatory, an inflammatory situation.
Yeah, that could cause a reaction.
Even if it's the truth, right? Even if it's the truth sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always got to be just enough truth in the message, even if the message is biased and telling a narrative. There's got to be just enough that they cover their ass. There's got to be just enough that, hey, they can kind of go, well, hey, yeah, we weren't lying about that person that did throw something at the police, or we weren't lying about that person that did get dragged off because they did X, Y, Z at the protest. Well, that was the truth. But they're not telling the rest of the story, and it's the lack of transparency or the lack of coverage with the other.
And just being unbiased, just not telling a story in a way where like, okay, we're for this and against that, or and vice versa. Just paint a picture for me. Let me decide.
Yeah, exactly. Because just give me all the information.
Yeah, different people are going to have different opinions on these things. There are people that are just very anti-police, and they're going to take that view regardless. And then there'll be ones that are pro. But I think this is where a lot of that pushback comes from as well, is people are just tired. And I mean, I've mentioned this in the previous episode exactly the same way. People are tired of being told how to perceive these things.
Yeah, how to think. Don't spoon feed it to me.
Yeah, it's just like, give me the picture. I'll decide. Yeah. I'll decide for myself. Don't tell me how you think that I should feel about it. Yeah. This is where that pushback comes from. This is that constant, the feeling that someone's trying to control you. I think this is why there is so much, so much conflict in a society right now, especially at this time. Well,
there's also so little that you can actually convey in a soundbite, right? Like you switch on. I don't know. I'm assuming people still switch on the news, and they'll click on something that is like a 2-minute clip, or it'll warn you it's only a 2-minute read, in the drop down. And you're supposed to get all the information that you can on the topic to be able to form an opinion, and that opinion could have some sway on how you navigate your day and the conversations that you're going to have with your co-workers or whatever it might be. That you're now influenced by that little soundbite. When in reality, there's so much nuance to every topic, that how do you get the context of the things that are being said if you're not actually there, you're not actually present, especially if you're not presented with all the information. If there's ways, and that's why podcast is so good, if you really want to deep dive into one topic, we can sit here for hours just talking about one thing, and we've touched upon a handful of different things, and each of those things are really just just a touch, right? But if we really deep dive into all those things, we'd actually get a really good idea of each other's point of view on each of those things. I've had some conversations with people that have completely opposed my point of view and my worldview, and we find that if we sit down and we talk about them for a little while, and kind of get all, okay, what do you think about this? Okay, well, here's my stance on it, and this is what I saw, and this is what I've been exposed to. Okay, well, I'd never heard that before. Well, all of a sudden, we've now got a better idea and understanding of really what actually happened. You saw X, I saw Y, and somewhere in the middle really is the kind of a balanced truth.
X and Y in there, and you realize also, I think that there's a good analogy for it called the circle of knowledge, where the more you learn, the less sure you are of something. Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're not confident in what you know, but it's just you understand that there's a lot more information out there. Like if your circle, the outline is that small, you think that you can see it, everything. And the bigger it gets, you realize that there's actually a lot more out there that you haven't yet covered. Yeah. There's all that ground that you haven't covered.
Almost too much, right?
Yeah.
And you get a better appreciation of it, and a constant reminder that there's all these things that you don't even know that you don't know, right?
Exactly. And so you're a lot less likely to jump to a conclusion. And I think I suppose this is the danger of social media is, you can take that 2-minute soundbite, interpret it in a certain way, and then you go and rebroadcast it with your opinion now. And depending on who you are, you might be an influential person. I don't know, because different people are influential for different reasons. You might just be a person a lot of people think is hot, so they like looking at your pictures, but then one day you decide to come out.
Is that your fan base?
No.
It's not my fan base.
Not mine. But like it happens all the time with models and whatnot. And then one day you decide to come out and actually, put your opinion out on something. Yeah. But, your opinion may not be actually formulated on all the available information. You just saw what you saw when you decided to put it out there.
Regurgitating something.
And now, now 1 million people have heard that. Yeah. And now 1 million people are influenced by that. So it does start a bit of a broken telephone kind of dynamic. Yeah.
Half those people might get that misinformation from me, and now they're regurgitating that misinformation or that small little piece of information. And the other half of the people, they know more about the topic than I do, and they think I'm a fucking moron. So it doesn't help anybody, right?
No. Yeah. So I think the main thing to take away from all this is just to always be open-minded and never jump to a definitive conclusion in the sense of committing to that point of view. It's kind of like, look, I know what I know. This is my opinion right now, and this is what I'm going to put forward. But I'm also open to expanding that. And the other thing, I think we as people need to give people some leeway in terms of that as well, because we do tend to jump down people's throats. Yeah. In terms of that, it's just like, oh, well, that's what you said. It's like, well, fuck, I have a right to change my opinion. I've learned something. I now think differently. So, like to hold people to that and say, oh, well, this is what you said and this is all you'll ever be now. I think that is the other thing. Yeah, and we all grow. And whether we've actually had our minds changed or whether it's just happened as an organic process over time as we get more information or as we grow and evolve our thought process, right? Like I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago. We're not. So we might think differently, we might have a broader worldview, but we'll probably find that if we sit down with these people that we conflict with, especially with some of the short, snippy remarks that you might get online, we probably have more in common, and we probably would agree on more things than we disagree on. Oftentimes, if you actually took the time to get to know somebody's story or hear what they had to say about a topic. And we touched on this off camera. You mentioned about debating. That's exactly it. Because see, from my point of view, like the reason why I wanted to do this podcast in the first place is to create a platform where people can challenge certain things. That's why it's called Versus Everything. Like I'm open to having a collision of opinions. Right. I'm not here to kind of just push my own point of view on everybody. I want to make sure that I'm able to put it against someone else's, expand my horizons, and hey, maybe there's a third person out there that knows even more. Like it expands the knowledge rather than kind of sticks to a certain particular point. Which is why I always said, if anybody wants it, Come on through.
come get that smoke.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, I'm not here to kind of, you know, to bully anybody, to fight with anyone, but hey, I mean, literally, it can solve a lot of problems. Talking can solve a lot of these issues, you know, a lot of disagreements and varying viewpoints that can lead to a lot of conflict that we see.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. I studied philosophy briefly. And one of the things that I remember from it, you know, we were studying the validity and soundness of deductive arguments. Like you're trying to break down things and just figure out, like, hey, is this relevant? Is this not relevant? What are they trying to say? What are they trying to communicate? And then it comes down to, if you also expand that further into debate. Well, do you remember? Did you debate at high school, for example? Did you ever touch on it? It's kind of weird in high school because, you know,
in high school, that was my only thing that I was good at English. In fact, I've never written a speech. I remember we'd spend so long preparing for speeches, you know, we'd have like an assessment speech and everybody would just sit there writing day in, day out, making plans and everything. I never did shit. I just fucked around the entire time, and on game day I'd show up and I'd do really well.
Wing it.
This is one thing that I'd actually get a decent mark in, and I'd be like, okay, cool, I just showed up, said my shit.
I am not surprised that you did good at that. But like, one of the most important things about debate that you'd recall is, like, you've got to be able to argue your point. But if you really want to do well in it, and good shooters would do this, they would flip the teams. They would say, okay, so you're pro-abortion and they're anti. Okay, now we're going to flip you over. And if you're going to win, if you want to win, if you want to get a passing grade, you're not going to have to convince us.
Well, you got to play devil's advocate.
Exactly. You got to play devil's advocate. You've actually got to deep dive into the information that your opposition is now presenting and really comprehend it, if you're going to deliver it in your own way, in your own format. And if you actually took the time to look at, okay, well, what are these people, what are they getting at? Why are they angry? Or what's their point of view? I don't know enough about this topic, or maybe I've formulated an opinion. Maybe I'm biased because my loved ones have already got their opinion. I've heard them talking about it.
Yeah.
But what is it?
Yeah, you have your preconceived opinion already. You already know how you feel about it. But what if you get on their side?
Step back.
Yeah. What if you actually come around to the other side and say, okay, well, let me see how you feel, how you got to that point.
Yeah.
And now that when you got both of the sides in your mind, you kind of realize where that middle is. You may not necessarily kind of solve the problem because some of them are very complex, and you know, I mean, if it was that easy, we'd solve a lot of problems and the world would be perfect. But reality is, at least we would avoid a lot of unnecessary conflict. You know, there are levels to conflict because, you know, having two opposing views is conflict, but it can be constructive. You know, you collide them together, and now we have something in the middle. Now we're good. Now we don't have to fight over this all the time.
Yeah, if there's a middle ground, then you can at least have some kind of compromise, and both sides need to be heard, right? They not just listened to, but heard. You know, and there's a distinction, right?
Yeah.
And if we can get there, and with healthy debate, with some healthy discussion, and in an open mind, open heart, to actually go, hey, look, I'm not just here to argue my point. I'm actually here because I stand for the possibility of us being able to move forward. Or if I live in that space, well, then how am I going to be able to communicate with you effectively so that I can allow you to be heard as well, and I can put my points down in front of you, and we can really kind of talk about this and see where we kind of marry up. And if we can find that middle ground,
I really like how you just said that. I want to put this out there. Listen to what he just said, because this is what this is about. And if anybody wants to come through and have some debates, anybody wants to talk to me, reach out. Make sure you do that. I feel like we can really chop up a lot of interesting topics on here. I feel like a lot of the things that are going on out there right now can be solved through just having discussions of opposing views.
Exactly right. I mean, it doesn't need to come to blows or to insults or to people, you know, blocking people on social media.
Yeah.
You know, just take a minute before you type out that you know, witty retort to some other flippant comment that you've read.
Yeah. Just trying to burn the other person.
Exactly.
You know?
Just take a fucking minute.
Yeah.
You know, that person at the other end there, they have feelings. They're a real person. They're a real person. And not only do they have feelings, but they're intelligent too. And they might be going through some shit. You just don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors affecting their arguments. So
yeah.
No, for sure, man. That was real cool, man. I appreciate it. See, this is what we do.
My
here.
man.
All right, one time for your mind versus everything.